Keep running, we're almost there. Don't look back.
They saw us, they're coming.
The most expensive silence in the world is the inside of a idling Lincoln Continental, or at least, that's how it felt to Jack Reynolds. The dashboard clock read 2:13 p.m. The digital numbers seemed to mock him, pulsing with a low-grade urgency that made the hair on his arms stand up. The air conditioning was set to a crisp 68 degrees, a luxury that chilled the sweat trickling down his back beneath a suit that was 2 years out of style and a size too tight in the shoulders. Jack wasn't a chauffeur. He was a mechanic who could strip a transmission blindfolded and rebuild it before lunch. But the garage on 4th Street Reynolds Repair was 3 months behind on the lease, and the bank was making noises about foreclosure. So, when Richard Sterling's head of security called looking for an imposing driver who knows how to handle a heavy vehicle for the wedding of the century, Jack had swallowed his pride, put on the suit, and taken the job. $300 an hour, that was the rate. 4 hours of work would cover the garage rent and the late fees for Maya's after-school program. He tapped the steering wheel, his grease-stained fingernails scrubbed raw, but never truly clean, drumming a restless rhythm against the leather. "Come on," he muttered, checking the rearview mirror. "Rich people are never on time, but this is ridiculous." If he didn't leave the Grand Hotel's loading zone in 20 minutes, he wouldn't make it to the elementary school by dismissal. If he was late again, the program director, Mrs. Gable, would give him that pitying look, the one reserved for single fathers who looked like they were barely holding it together. He hated that look more than he hated being broke. Jack scanned the perimeter. The Grand Hotel was a fortress of glass and steel, currently besieged by paparazzi. They were penned behind velvet ropes 50 yards away, their camera lenses looking like the multifaceted eyes of hungry insects. Inside, the Sterling Vance wedding was taking place. A merger of shipping empires disguised as a sacrament. Jack didn't care about the politics. He just wanted his passengers, some VIP cousin of the groom, to get in the car so he could get paid. Then the atmosphere shifted. It wasn't a sound, but a sudden, sharp change in the air pressure, like the moment before a thunderstorm breaks. The board security guards at the main entrance straightened up, hands flying to their earpieces. The revolving glass doors stopped spinning, then they exploded outward. It wasn't a bomb. It was a woman. She burst onto the pavement with the force of a natural disaster, a blinding white comet of silk, tulle, and terror. She stumbled, her heel catching on the pavement, but she recovered with a desperate, animalistic grace. This wasn't a bride making a grand entrance. This was a prisoner making a break for it. Jack sat up straighter, his mechanic's eye instantly assessing the situation. She was stunning in the way a car crash is stunning, violent, and impossible to look away from. Her blonde hair, an intricate sculpture of waves and pins, was coming undone, whipping around a face drained of all blood. Her eyes were wide, scanning the street with a frantic intensity that Jack recognized. He'd seen that look on soldiers in bad situations. He'd seen it on stray dogs cornered in an alley. "Hey!" a voice boomed from the lobby. Behind her, the hotel entrance erupted into chaos. 4 men in dark suits shoved through the doors. These weren't the hotel doormen in their goofy epaulets. These men moved with efficient, predatory speed. They wore earpieces and suits that didn't wrinkle, mercenaries. Jack's hand hovered over the gear shift. His instructions were to wait for a Mr. Henderson. He should lock the doors, he should look away, he should stay out of it. The woman spun around, her chest heaving. She looked left blocked by a limousine, she looked right blocked by the paparazzi pen. Then she looked at him. Through the windshield, their eyes locked. For a split second, time suspended. Jack saw the desperation in her blue eyes, a silent, screaming plea that cut right through the tinted glass and hit him in the gut. She didn't wave. She didn't gesture. She just saw the running engine and made a choice. She hitched up the massive volume of her dress yards of French lace and hand-stitched crystals and sprinted straight for his car. "Don't do it, Jack," he whispered to himself. "Don't you do it." His hand moved on its own, popping the locks with a heavy thunk. She didn't hesitate. She wrenched the back door open, but the sheer volume of her dress made it impossible to enter quickly. She looked back. The men were closing the distance. The lead pursuer, a man with a jagged scar bisecting his eyebrow, was reaching inside his jacket. Jack knew that reach. That wasn't for a walkie-talkie, front seat? Jack roared, leaning over and throwing the passenger door open. Get in the front, forget the dress. She understood instantly. She abandoned the back door and dove into the passenger seat, drowning the cockpit in white fabric. Drive! She screamed, her voice raw. Just drive! Jack slammed the Lincoln into drive. He didn't ease off the curb. He stomped the accelerator. The heavy sedan lurched forward, the V6 engine roaring in protest. The tires shrieked, smoking against the asphalt as he peeled away, the rear bumper missing the lead security guard by inches. Stop the car! The scarred man yelled, drawing a weapon, but thinking better of firing in front of the cameras. Head down! Jack commanded, his hands shooting out to push her head toward the dashboard. He wove through the initial congestion of the hotel driveway, mounting the curb to bypass a florist's van. The suspension groaned, but the car held. He hit the main avenue, ignoring the red light and cutting across 3 lanes of traffic, earning a chorus of angry horns. Are they following? The woman gasped, struggling to sit up amidst the sea of tulle. Jack checked the rearview mirror. A black Cadillac Escalade had torn out of the hotel garage, its grille growing larger in his reflection. Black SUV, professional drivers, Jack noted, his voice terrifyingly calm. Hold on, this is going to get rough. Rough? She cried. I'm in a wedding dress. Better a dirty dress than a body bag, Jack snapped. He took a sharp left, the tires fighting for grip. They were entering the business district, a grid of one-way streets and heavy afternoon traffic. The Escalade was powerful, but top-heavy. The Lincoln was lower, wider. Jack knew how this car breathed. He knew its weight distribution. He saw a gap in the traffic ahead, an alleyway used for dumpster pickups. It was tight, barely wide enough for the sedan. You're not going down there, she said, eyes widening. Watch me. Jack killed the headlights and braked hard, swinging the nose of the car into the alley. Sparks flew as the side mirror scraped the brick wall. He gunned it down the narrow passage, garbage cans clipping the bumper. He burst out onto the parallel street, checking the mirror. The Escalade had tried to follow but hesitated at the narrow entrance. That hesitation was all Jack needed. He took 2 quick rights and merged onto the on-ramp for the industrial highway, disappearing into the flow of heavy trucks. He drove in silence for 10 minutes, his eyes constantly flicking between the road and the mirrors, checking for the tail. He took a convoluted route, doubling back twice until he was certain they were ghosts. Only then did the adrenaline begin to recede, replaced by the cold reality of what he had just done. He pulled the car off the main road and into the shadowed gravel lot of the defunct textile warehouse near the docks. The area was a graveyard of rusted metal and broken glass, the kind of place where bad things happened or where people went to hide. He put the car in park and killed the engine. The silence that rushed back into the car was heavy, broken only by the ticking of the cooling engine and the woman's ragged breathing. Jack turned to look at her fully. She was a wreck. The veil was torn, hanging from her hair like a surrender flag. Mascara tracked dark lines down her cheeks. Her hands were shaking so violently that the massive diamond on her finger was vibrating against the leather armrest. You okay? Jack asked, his tone rough. He wasn't good at comfort. She let out a breath that shuddered through her entire frame. I think so. Are we safe? For now. I lost them 3 miles back. Jack gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white. You wanted to tell me what the hell that was? Because those guys back there? They weren't wedding ushers. That guy with the scar looked like he wanted to put a hole in my windshield. She looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time. She saw the grease stain near his cuff that the dry cleaner had missed. She saw the weary lines around his eyes, the cheap watch, and the jaw that was set in stone. She saw a man who was dangerous, but not malicious. My father's security team, she whispered, her voice trembling. And my fiancé's cold feet? Jack asked, skeptical. A cold life, she corrected bitterly. She reached up, ripping the ruined veil from her hair and tossing it into the back seat with a surprising amount of venom. It wasn't a wedding. It was a merger. My father is Robert Vance, the groom is Richard Sterling. They're merging their shipping empires to monopolize the eastern seaboard. I was just the contract clause that made it legally binding. Jack felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. He didn't follow the society pages, but you couldn't live in this city without knowing the name Vance. Vance Logistics owned the warehouses, the trucks, and half the politicians. Vance? Jack repeated, rubbing his face with his hand. Great, I just kidnapped Elena Vance. You didn't kidnap me, she said quickly. I jumped in. Tell that to the cops when they find us, Jack shot back. Lady, I'm a mechanic. I have a garage that's bleeding money and a 7-year-old daughter waiting to be picked up. If I don't get you back, I'm going to have every private contractor and corrupt cop in the city tearing my life apart. No, she lunged across the console, grabbing his arm. Her grip was surprisingly strong, her nails digging into his suit jacket. Please, you can't take me back. You don't understand, Richard. He's a monster. He smiles for the cameras, but behind closed doors. She choked on the words, a fresh wave of tears spilling over. I have money. I have a go-bag stashed at a locker in Union Station, but I couldn't get to it. I just need a place to hide. Just for tonight, I'll pay you. Double whatever they were paying you. Triple. Jack looked at her hand on his arm. Then he looked at the clock. 2:45 p.m., the late fee at the after-school program kicked in at 3 p.m. He looked at Elena Vance. He saw the terror in her eyes, a terror he recognized. It was the look of someone trapped, someone who had been told their whole life that they were property, not a person. He thought of Maya. He thought of what he would do if someone tried to sell his daughter like a piece of livestock to a man like Sterling. He cursed it under his breath, a long inventive string of profanity that filled the small cabin. I have to pick up my daughter, he said flatly, turning the key in the ignition. The engine roared back to life. Elena flinched, shrinking back against the door. You're taking me back? No, Jack said, throwing the car into reverse and spinning the wheel. I'm going to get my kid. Because I'm late. Elena blinked, confusion warring with relief. Your daughter? Maya, she's 7. And if we're late, I have to pay Mrs. Gable $15 I don't have. Jack glanced at her, his expression unreadable. You can come with me, or you can get out here in the industrial district in a $20,000 dress. Your call. Elena looked out the window at the desolate warehouses, the broken glass and the shadows stretching long in the afternoon sun. Then she looked back at Jack the mechanic, who drove like a stuntman and worried about $15. I'm coming with you, she said. Fine, Jack grunted, punching the gas. But try to cover up the diamonds. You're blinding me. The elementary school pickup lane was a brutal ecosystem of minivans, SUVs, and judgmental stares. Jack's black Lincoln Continental, still radiating heat from the high-speed chase, looked like a shark swimming in a school of goldfish. He pulled up to the curb just as the digital clock flickered to 3:01 p.m. You're late, Mr. Reynolds, Mrs. Gable said, leaning down to the driver's side window. She was a woman who wielded a clipboard like a weapon. We were just about to call emergency contacts. Traffic was murder, Mrs. Gable, Jack said, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Won't happen again. It's happened 3 times this month. She sniffed, her eyes darting past him to the passenger seat. Her jaw dropped. Elena Vance was shrinking into the leather seat. Jack's oversized, grease-stained flannel shirt, which he'd kept in the back for emergencies, buttoned hastily over her bodice. It did little to hide the miles of tulle and French lace exploding around her legs, or the diamonds that caught the afternoon sun like signal flares. Is that, Mrs. Gable stammered, is that a wedding dress? Costume party, Jack said smoothly, very exclusive. Come on, Maya. The back door flew open, and a small whirlwind of pink backpack and chaotic energy climbed in. Maya, 7 years old and missing her 2 front teeth, buckled her seatbelt with practiced efficiency before looking up. Hi, Dad, you smell like tires, she paused, her eyes shifting to the front passenger seat. She went still. Elena turned, offering a small, terrified wave. Hi. Maya stared. She looked at the diamond necklace. She looked at the intricate, ruined hairstyle. She looked at the white fabric pooling on the floor mats. Are you a princess? Maya asked, her voice hushed with reverence. Elena let out a breath that was half laugh, half sob. Not today, sweetie. Today I'm just a passenger. She's a friend, Mia, Jack interrupted. pulling the car away from the curb before Mrs. Gable could memorize his license plate. "We're going to have a guest for dinner, and we're going to be quiet about it. Secret mission rules." Maya's eyes widened. Secret mission? Like spies? "Exactly like spies," Jack said, catching Elena's eye in the rearview mirror. "Now, hold on. We're taking the long way home." Jack's apartment was located directly above Reynolds Repair, in a neighborhood where the buildings were brick, the fences were chain link, and the ambient noise was a mix of distant sirens and cargo trains. Getting Elena up the narrow metal staircase was a logistical nightmare. The dress, designed for the wide aisles of a cathedral, was not built for a rusted fire escape entrance. Jack ended up having to walk behind her, bundling the train of the dress in his arms like he was carrying laundry, while Maya led the way, skipping steps. "Welcome to the penthouse," Jack muttered as he unlocked the door. The apartment was small. It was clean, but it wore its poverty honestly. The linoleum in the kitchen was peeling at the corners, the sofa was covered in a knitted throw to hide a tear, and the air smelled of motor oil, old coffee, and lemon polish. Elena stepped inside and stopped. She looked around, her eyes adjusting to the dim light. To Jack, the silence felt heavy. He was suddenly acutely aware of the stack of unpaid bills on the counter, the water stain on the ceiling, and the fact that his guest was wearing a dress that cost more than the building's assessed value. "It's cozy," Elena said. "It's small," Jack corrected, locking the deadbolt and sliding the chain across. He moved to the window, peering through the blinds at the street below. Empty, for now. "Bathroom is down the hall on the left. You might want to try and, I don't know, diffuse that dress," Elena nodded, looking lost. "Thank you." As she walked down the hall, the rustling of silk filling the small space, Maya tugged on Jack's pant leg. "Dad?" she whispered loud enough to be heard in the next county. "Why is the princess sad?" Jack crouched down, brushing a stray hair from his daughter's face. "She had a bad day, Bug, a really bad day. We're just going to let her hide out here for a bit until she figures out what to do. So, I need you to be cool. Can you be cool?" Maya nodded solemnly. "Ice cold. Good, now, go wash your hands. It's grilled cheese night." "Yes." Maya pumped her fist and ran to her room. Jack moved to the kitchen, his body running on autopilot. He pulled the cast-iron skillet from the oven, grabbed the butter, the white bread, and the pack of Kraft singles. It was the meal of champions, or at least the meal of single dads who were 3 days from payday. He was flipping the second sandwich when Elena returned. She had transformed. She had found a pair of his gray sweatpants and a black t-shirt drying on the radiator in the bathroom. She had washed the mascara streaks from her face and pulled the pins from her hair, letting the blonde waves fall loose around her shoulders. She looked smaller, younger, and infinitely more human. She was holding the wedding dress, a massive, ghostly bundle in her arms. "I didn't know where to put this," she said, looking at the bundle with disdain. "Toss it in the corner," Jack said, gesturing with the spatula, "or the trash. Your call." She dropped it on the floor near the coat rack with a dull thud. It looked like a slain beast. She sat on one of the mismatched bar stools at the small kitchen island. She watched Jack cook, her eyes tracking the sizzle of the butter. "I haven't smelled butter in 6 months," she said quietly. Jack looked up. "What?" "The wedding prep," she said, tracing a groove in the countertop. "My father and Richard, they wanted me to be sample size. I've been on a regimen of green juice, almonds, and steam for half a year." Jack frowned, sliding a plate in front of her. The sandwich was golden brown, oozing yellow cheese, cut diagonally. "Well, this is pure grease and processed dairy. Eat up." Elena picked up a half. Her hands were still trembling slightly. She took a bite. She closed her eyes, and a sound escaped her throat, a genuine groan of pleasure. "Oh my God," she whispered. "This is amazing. It's $5 worth of groceries," Jack said, leaning his hip against the counter and watching her. "But I'm glad you like it." Maya climbed onto the stool next to her, inspecting her own sandwich. "Dad burns them sometimes. But he scraped the black part off yours. That means he likes you." "Maya," Jack warned. Elena laughed. It was a rusty sound, but real. "Thank you, Jack, for the non-burnt sandwich, and for everything else." They ate in a relatively comfortable silence. The initial shock of the escape was fading, replaced by the strange, intimate reality of sharing a meal. "So," Jack said, cracking open a beer and sliding it toward her. She took it without hesitation, taking a long pull. "What's the plan, Elena?" "And don't tell me run away. Running is a direction, not a destination." Elena wiped her mouth with a paper napkin. The food seemed to have put some color back in her cheeks, and some steel in her spine. "I have a trust," she explained. "From my grandmother. My father couldn't touch it, but he controlled access to it until I turned 25 or got married." "I turned 25 last week, so you have money," Jack said. "Technically. But my father has eyes on all my usual accounts. If I use a credit card, he finds me. If I use my phone, he finds me." She looked at the smartphone sitting on the counter. Jack's phone. "I need to get to the First National Bank downtown physically. I have a safety deposit box there with the authentication keys to transfer the funds to an account he can't freeze. Once I do that, I can disappear." "Disappear where? Europe? Asia? A farm in Idaho?" She shrugged. "Anywhere I'm not Elena Vance, the merger bride." "And what happens to the merger?" Jack asked. Elena's face hardened. "It collapses. The Sterling family needed my father's distribution network. My father needed the Sterling capital to cover up some irregularities. Without the marriage, the contract is void. The stock dips, the investors panic." She took another sip of beer. "I hope they burn." Jack studied her. He had expected a spoiled princess throwing a tantrum. What he saw was a hostage negotiating her release. "You really hate them," he observed. "I don't just hate them, Jack. I fear them." She leaned forward. "Richard Sterling isn't just a businessman. He hurts people. He enjoys it. Last week, at the rehearsal dinner, I wore a dress with long sleeves to hide the bruises on my upper arm where he grabbed me because I smiled at a waiter." Jack's hand tightened around his beer bottle until the glass creaked. The mechanic in him, the fixer, wanted to go find Richard Sterling and disassemble him. "Okay," Jack said, his voice low. "We get you to the bank tomorrow morning, as soon as it opens." "And tonight?" Elena asked, glancing at the window. "Tonight you sleep on the couch. I'll take the chair. We keep the lights off." Maya finished her sandwich and wiped her hands on her shirt. "Can Elena sleep in my room? I have a bunk bed." "She can have the bottom because she's tall." Elena looked at the little girl, her expression softening into something heartbreakingly gentle. "I would love that, Maya, if it's okay with your dad." Jack nodded. "Fine, but lights out in 20 minutes. It's a school night?" The evening settled into a surreal domestic rhythm. Elena, the billionaire heiress, sat on the floor of Maya's room, helping her glue dried macaroni onto a piece of construction paper for a sprawling art project. Jack sat in the living room, cleaning his handgun. He wasn't a violent man, but he was a careful one. He disassembled the slide, checked the spring, and oiled the barrel. He kept one ear on the police scanner, he kept on the bookshelf, and the other on the giggles coming from the bedroom. He couldn't remember the last time he heard a woman's laugh in this apartment. His wife, Sarah, had left 5 years ago. She had wanted a life that Jack couldn't provide: vacations, new cars, a zip code that didn't start with 0. She walked out one morning to buy milk and never came back, eventually sending divorce papers from Arizona. Jack had built a fortress around himself and Maya since then. He worked, he paid bills, he fixed cars. He didn't do complications. Elena Vance was the biggest complication he had ever met. Around 9 p.m., the bedroom door creaked open. Elena walked out, closing the door softly behind her. "She's out," Elena whispered. "She talks a lot, doesn't she?" "Takes after her mother," Jack said, holstering the weapon and tucking it into the drawer of the end table. "You okay?" Elena walked to the window, peering through the slats of the blinds. The streetlights had flickered on, casting long orange shadows across the pavement. "You're a good dad, Jack," she said, not turning around. "I try." "I screw up a lot." She turned to face him. In the dim light of the living room, wearing his baggy clothes, she looked ethereal. "You have a home, a real one. Do you know I grew up in a 50-room mansion and I never felt like I lived there? It was a museum. I was just one of the exhibits. Grass is always greener," Jack muttered, standing up to clear the beer bottles. "You see a home. I see a mortgage I can't pay and a business that's 2 months from bankruptcy. Is it that bad?" Elena asked, stepping closer. Worse, the big chains are squeezing the independent garages out. I can't compete with their prices. I took this driving gig today just to keep the lights on for another week. Elena looked around the room, her eyes landing on the worn carpet, the family photos, the life that was struggling to survive. I can help you, she said. When I get my money, I didn't pick you up for a payout, Jack snapped, his pride flaring up. I know, Elena said, reaching out to touch his arm. Her fingers were cool against his skin. That's why I want to help. You're the first person in my life who did something for me without expecting a return on investment. You saw a stranger in trouble and you opened the door. That makes you a hero, Jack. Jack looked down at her. The air in the room seemed to thin, the tension shifting from danger to something else. He could smell the soap she had used, Maya's strawberry shampoo, and beneath that, a faint, expensive perfume that had survived the chase. I'm no hero, Jack said, his voice rough. I'm just a guy who hates bullies. Elena took a step closer. The distance between them was negligible now. Jack could see the flecks of gold in her blue eyes. He could see the vulnerability she was trying so hard to hide. Jack, she whispered. He shouldn't. He knew he shouldn't. She was a client. She was a fugitive. She was from a world that viewed people like him as overhead costs. But when she leaned in, he didn't pull away. Crash. The sound didn't come from the room. It came from downstairs. It was the distinctive metallic clamor of the heavy roller door of the garage being hit. Hard. Jack pulled away instantly, the moment shattered. His face hardened, the soft look for Elena vanishing behind a mask of tactical alertness. He killed the single lamp in the living room, plunging them into darkness. What was that? Elena gasped, grabbing his arm. They're here, Jack hissed. Stay down. He moved to the window, but not the one facing the street. He went to the side window that overlooked the alleyway entrance to the garage. He peeked through the very edge of the blinds. Down in the alley, shadows were moving, not police. Police used flashing lights and bullhorns. These shadows were silent, tactical, and efficient. He counted 3 black SUVs blocking the alley and the street front. 6 men were visible, moving toward the side door of the shop. How? Elena whispered, crouching behind the sofa, terror flooding back into her voice. We lost them. The car, Jack cursed, slamming his hand against the sill. The Lincoln, it's a rental from a high-end service. It has a GPS tracker. I was so worried about the tail, I forgot about the LoJack. He ran to the end table and grabbed the gun. He checked the chamber 1 in the spout, full magazine. Daddy? Maya stood in the doorway of her bedroom, clutching a stuffed rabbit, rubbing her eyes. What's that noise? Jack's heart stopped. This was his nightmare. He moved to Maya, scooping her up and carrying her to Elena behind the couch. Listen to me, Jack said, his voice low and intense, gripping Elena's shoulder. They are coming through the garage. That steel door will hold them for maybe 2 minutes. I'm going down there to stall them. No, Elena grabbed his wrist. Jack, look at them. They're armed. They'll kill you. My father doesn't care about collateral damage. He just wants the asset back. I'm not letting them up those stairs, Jack said, his eyes burning. I'm not letting them near my daughter. There has to be another way, Elena pleaded. She looked at the terrified little girl, then at the man who was ready to die for a stranger and his child. The fear in Elena's eyes suddenly shifted. It solidified into something cold and hard. She was done running. She was done hiding behind men. Give me your phone, she said. Jack blinked, confused by the sudden command. What? Give me your phone, Jack, now. He pulled it from his pocket and handed it to her. Her fingers flew across the cracked screen, tapping with a fury he hadn't seen before. Who are you calling? The cops? Useless, she spat. The cops are on my father's payroll. I'm calling the only thing he's actually afraid of. Who? The board of directors, she said, hitting a button. And the Securities and Exchange Commission. A megaphone screeched from the street below, the amplified voice booming through the thin walls of the apartment. Reynolds, we know she is in there. Open the door. Or we breach. You have 60 seconds. Jack stood up, checking the weapon again. Stay here, he commanded. Lock the door behind me. If you hear shots, you take the fire escape. Do not look back. Jack. He didn't wait. He moved to the apartment door, unlocked it, and stepped out onto the landing. He locked it from the outside with his key, trapping them in safety, and turned to face the stairs leading down to the dark garage bay. He took a deep breath, gripping the cold steel of the railing. "All right," he whispered to the darkness. "Let's see what $300 an hour buys you." He descended into the gloom, toward the sound of metal groaning under the force of a battering ram. Jack Reynolds descended the wooden stairs into the garage bay, the darkness swallowing him whole. The air down here was different. Upstairs it smelled of grilled cheese and safety. Down here it smelled of hydraulic fluid, cold concrete, and the lingering exhaust of a dozen old engines. It was the smell of his livelihood, and tonight it was the smell of a battlefield. He moved through the shadows with a muscle memory born of 10 years working in this space. He knew exactly where the engine hoist was parked. He knew which floorboard creaked near the tool chest. He moved silently to the main workbench, his hand brushing against the cold steel of a massive torque wrench. He picked it up. It wasn't a gun, but in close quarters, 5 pounds of chrome vanadium steel was a formidable argument. The banging on the main roller door had stopped. That was worse. Banging meant they were asking. Silence meant they were preparing. Jack tucked the handgun into the back of his waistband, covered by his flannel shirt. He didn't want to escalate to a firefight, not with Maya upstairs, but he'd be damned if he'd be caught empty-handed. He stood in the center of the bay, facing the corrugated metal sheet that separated his world from the alley. "I know you're in there, Reynolds." Vance's voice came again, muffled but distinct. "We have thermal imaging. We can see the heat signature of the engine block. We know you haven't left." Jack walked over to the wall console. He didn't shout back. He didn't negotiate. He simply hit the large red button. Clack, 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 the chain drive rattled to life. The heavy metal door began to rise, inch by agonizing inch, revealing the scene outside like a slow-motion curtain call on a horror movie. First he saw the tires, heavy-duty run-flats on blacked-out SUVs. Then the shoes, polished leather dress shoes and tactical boots. Then the knees. When the door hit the halfway point, Jack stooped under it and stood to his full height, the torque wrench resting casually on his shoulder. He was facing a firing squad. 6 men stood in a semicircle. They weren't police. They were private contractors, the kind of men who operated in gray zones where badges didn't matter. They wore tactical vests over their suits, and their hands hovered near holstered weapons. In the center of the formation stood Robert Vance. The billionaire looked out of place in the grimy alley, yet he commanded the space. His tuxedo was impeccable, his silver hair perfectly coiffed, but his face was a mask of simmering rage. He looked at Jack not as a human being, but as a stubborn obstacle, a pothole in the road of his empire. "Mr. Reynolds," Vance said, his voice smooth and terrifyingly calm, "you have something of mine." "I don't have anything of yours," Jack said, his voice echoing slightly in the concrete bay. "I have a repair shop. I have a headache, and I have a lot of work to do. So, unless you're here for an oil change, get off my property." Vance stepped forward, his shoes crunching on the gravel. "Cute, but I'm not in the mood for blue-collar wit. You have my daughter. You have a car that doesn't belong to you. That constitutes grand theft auto and kidnapping." "She walked into the car," Jack said, his grip tightening on the wrench, "and she's 25 years old. Last I checked, grown women aren't property you can file a theft report on. She is mentally unstable," Vance lied effortlessly. "She's having an episode. We are here to take her to a facility where she can get the help she needs. She seemed pretty stable when she was eating a sandwich 10 minutes ago," Jack drawled. "She seemed pretty lucid when she told me about the bruises her fiancé left on her arm." Vance's expression didn't flicker, but the air around him grew colder. "Richard has a temper. It's handled within the family. That is none of your concern." "It became my concern when she got in my passenger seat," Vance sighed, checking his watch, a Patek Philippe that cost more than Jack's entire garage. "I have a merger to salvage. Investors are calling. I am losing millions by the minute standing in this alley." He signaled to the man with the scar on his eye, the same one from the hotel. "Grab him, search the building." The scarred man stepped forward, drawing a collapsible baton. "Drop the wrench, grease monkey." Jack shifted his stance, widening his base. He was outnumbered 6 to 1. He calculated the odds. He could take the scarred guy, maybe the second one. But the third one would put a bullet in him. He didn't care. He wasn't moving. First guy through that door leaves in an ambulance, Jack promised, his voice low and lethal. The security team hesitated. They were paid to bully, not to die. They saw the look in Jack's eyes, the look of a man with nothing to lose but the people upstairs. "Draw your weapons," Vance barked, losing patience. "He's resisting." 4 Glocks were unholstered instantly, the distinct sound of slides racking echoing off the brick walls. The standoff had shifted from a brawl to an execution. Jack moved his hand toward the small of his back. He was fast, but he wasn't faster than 4 guns. "Daddy!" The scream came from behind Jack. It pierced the tension like a knife. Jack spun around, his heart hammering against his ribs. Elena stood at the top of the metal stairs leading down from the apartment. But she wasn't the trembling victim he had driven away from the hotel. She was an avenging angel. She was still wearing Jack's oversized flannel shirt and sweatpants, but she wore them like armor. Her hair was loose, her feet were bare against the cold metal grating, and her eyes were ablaze with a fury that matched her father's. In her right hand she held Jack's smartphone. She held it high, the camera lens pointed directly at the group in the alley. "Elena, get down here," Vance snapped, though he took a half step back. "Stop this nonsense." "Smile, Daddy," Elena said, her voice trembling with adrenaline but loud and clear. "You're live," Vance froze. "What?" Elena descended the stairs, one slow step at a time. She didn't hide behind Jack. She walked right up to his side, placing herself between the gunman and the mechanic. "I said, you're live," she repeated, turning the phone screen so Vance could see. "I'm streaming on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. 24,000 viewers and climbing. Say hello to the shareholders?" The security guards looked at each other. They lowered their weapons instinctively. Shooting a mechanic in a dark alley was a cleanup job. Shooting a billionaire's daughter on a live stream was a life sentence. "Turn it off," Vance hissed, his face draining of color. "No," Elena said, "and that's not all. 2 minutes ago, I scheduled an email to be sent to the Securities and Exchange Commission, the FBI, and the editors of the New York Times." Vance laughed nervously. "You have nothing on me, Elena. You're a charity coordinator. You know nothing about the business." "I know everything," Elena shouted, her voice cracking with the weight of years of silence. "I know about the shell companies in the Caymans. I know that the Sterling merger isn't about shipping logistics. It's about covering up the $300 million pension fund deficit you created by gambling on lithium futures. I know about Project Anchor. I have the account numbers. I have the dates. I have the signatures. The silence that fell over the alley was absolute. Even the distant city traffic seemed to hush. Jack looked at Elena. She was vibrating with energy, her chin held high. She wasn't bluffing. She was nooking the sight from orbit. You wouldn't," Vance whispered. "I'm your father. That money is your inheritance." "I don't want your money," Elena spat. "I want my life. I want you to leave. I want Richard Sterling to rot. And I want you to never, ever come near me or this family again." "This family?" Vance sneered, looking at Jack. "You think this mechanic is family?" "He did more for me in 4 hours than you did in 25 years, Elena said. "He protected me. You sold me." She took a step forward, shoving the phone camera into her father's face. "So here is the deal, Robert. You are going to get in your cars. You are going to leave. You are going to announce that the wedding is off due to irreconcilable differences. And if I see one strange car on this street, or if Mr. Reynolds gets so much as a parking ticket, I hit send on the rest of the files." Vance stared at his daughter. He searched her face for a trace of the obedient, frightened girl he had raised. He found only a stranger who had him checkmated. He looked at the phone. He looked at the armed guards who were now backing away, unwilling to be part of a federal crime caught on camera. He adjusted his cufflinks. He straightened his tie. He regained his composure, but his eyes were dead. "You're making a mistake, Elena," he said coldly. "Without me, you are nothing." "Without you," Elena corrected. "I am finally free." Vance sneered one last time at Jack. "Enjoy her. She's high maintenance." He turned on his heel. "Let's go." The security team didn't need to be told twice. They holstered their weapons and scrambled back into the SUVs. Doors slammed, engines roared. Jack and Elena stood side by side in the garage bay as the convoy reversed out of the alley, tires kicking up gravel, and sped away into the night. They stood there for a long time, watching the dust settle. Jack slowly lowered the torque wrench. He let out a breath that felt like it had been trapped in his lungs for a lifetime. He turned to look at Elena. She was staring at the empty alley, the phone still held up. Then her arm dropped. Her knees buckled. Jack caught her before she hit the concrete. "I got you," he murmured, pulling her close. She buried her face in his flannel shirt, her body shaking with the aftershocks of the confrontation. She wasn't crying. She was just trying to remember how to breathe. "Did you really send it?" Jack asked softly, stroking her hair. "The email to the sec?" She pulled back, looking up at him with tear-filled eyes. "No, it's sitting in my drafts." Jack raised an eyebrow. "That was a hell of a bluff." "It wasn't a bluff," she said fiercely. "If they come back, I'll send it. But for now, I just wanted them gone." "They're gone," Jack promised. "They're gone. Daddy?" They both looked up. Maya was peeking through the railing of the stairs, clutching her stuffed rabbit. "Did the bad men leave?" she asked. Jack smiled, the first genuine, unburdened smile he had felt in years. He kept one arm around Elena and reached the other out toward his daughter. "Yeah, baby," Jack said. "The bad men left. Come on down. We're locking up." 6 months later, the sound of Reynolds and Vance Automotive was a symphony of productivity. The hiss of pneumatic drills, the classic rock blaring from the new surround sound system, and the ringing of the office phone created a chaotic harmony that Jack had grown to love. The garage bay was transformed. The dim, greasy cave was gone. In its place was a brightly lit, epoxy-floored workspace with 4 lifts, all of them occupied. There were 2 new mechanics hired at union wages, working on a BMW and a vintage Mustang. Jack wiped his hands on a shop rag, admiring the shine on the 1968 Camaro he had just finished tuning. He wasn't wearing a suit. He was in his coveralls, grease under his nails, exactly where he belonged. He walked toward the front office, which had been expanded into the neighboring unit. Through the glass partition, he saw her. Elena was on the phone, pacing behind a sleek mahogany desk. She was wearing designer jeans and a simple white blouse, her hair tied back in a messy bun with a pencil stuck through it. She looked tired, stressed, and absolutely radiant. She slammed the phone down and looked up as Jack entered. "Supply chain issues?" she groaned, rubbing her temples. "The alternator shipment is stuck in Ohio. I had to threaten to switch suppliers to get them to expedite it." "You threatened them?" Jack grinned, leaning over the desk to steal a donut from the box. "You're getting scary, boss. Someone has to be the bad cop," she smiled, swatting his hand away. "Those are for the clients. I'm a client. I bring my truck here. You're the owner," she corrected. Co-owner. It had been a long 6 months. The legal battles with her father were ongoing, a slow war of attrition fought by lawyers in high-rise conference rooms. Elena's assets were frozen, thawed, and frozen again. But she had managed to liberate a small portion of her grandmother's trust, just enough to invest in the garage. She hadn't just thrown money at it. She had thrown herself at it. She learned the inventory systems. She revamped the marketing. She charmed the suppliers. She worked harder than anyone Jack had ever known. "How's Maya?" Elena asked, leaning back in her chair. "Good. She's asking if you're still coming to the school play tonight. She's nervous about her lines. Apparently, tree number 2 has a very pivotal scene." "I wouldn't miss it," Elena said softly. "I'm bringing the makeup kit. We have to make sure her bark looks realistic." She stood up and walked around the desk. The office faded away. The noise of the shop became background static. She stopped in front of Jack, resting her hands on his chest, right over the embroidered patch that read Jack. "I saw the news," she said quietly. "About Sterling." Elena nodded. "Indicted. Insider trading, embezzlement, and assault." Several women came forward after the story about the wedding broke. "He's looking at 20 years. Couldn't happen to a nicer guy," Jack said, his voice grim. "He called me, Elena said. From jail, he wanted me to testify to his character. What did you say?" "I told him I'd be happy to," she smiled, a dangerous glint in her eyes. I told him I'd tell the jury exactly who he is, Jack chuckled, wrapping his arms around her waist. Remind me never to cross you. You saved me, Jack, she whispered, the playfulness vanishing. I was drowning in that life. You pulled me out. I was just the getaway driver, Jack dismissed gently, resting his forehead against hers. No, she insisted, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. You stopped. Everyone else in that city saw a spectacle. They saw a crazy woman in a dress. You saw me. You stopped the car. Best decision I ever made, Jack murmured. He kissed her then. It wasn't the desperate, adrenaline-fueled kiss of a movie climax. It was a slow, steady kiss. It tasted of coffee, donuts, and a future that they were building, brick by brick, bolt by bolt. Hey! They broke apart. Maya was standing in the doorway of the office, wearing her school backpack and looking impatient. Are you guys kissing again? She groaned, rolling her eyes. Gross. Extremely gross, Jack agreed, wiping lipstick from his mouth. We're going to be late. Maya pointed at her wrist, where a plastic watch sat. The trees have to be in makeup by 5. We're coming, Elena laughed, grabbing her purse and keys. I'll drive, Jack said, reaching for the keys to the shop truck. Elena snatched them away before he could grab them. She spun the key ring around her finger, her blue eyes sparkling with mischief. Not a chance, Reynolds, she grinned, walking toward the door. I'm the getaway driver now. Jack watched her walk out to the truck, holding Maya's hand, the two of them chatting animatedly about leaf textures. He looked around his shop, at the work he loved and the life he had reclaimed. He smiled, shook his head, and followed them out into the sunlight.